I want to hammer these points home, so let's forge ahead. Hello everyone, Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and thank you Raid for sponsoring this video. Definitely appreciate you letting me bring content to you guys, the viewers. You guys are absolutely amazing, and Raid is amazing for sponsoring this video. Thank you very much. So we are here on my main account because we are going to be talking about forging gear. Now, I've talked about it a couple times. I think I've actually done previous videos on it beforehand, but I really want to recap this a bit just to let you guys know how important the forge is. And here's the thing, you will actually hear some endgame players say that farming dungeons is dead because the forge gear is so much better. They're partially true with that. It is still worth farming, especially for newer accounts, for accounts that don't have the volume of gear. And to be fair, there is a limit to what you can forge in the forge at any point in time based off of both what you've played and or what you have spent, because things like the Forge Pass exists and those things are going to get you better gear that you can forge as well. So we're going to talk about how to make the best use of the forge, both as an early game and as a late game player, so that you can forge the best gear, because I can tell you right now, forging gear, when you're forging gear, is going to be so much better and so much more rewarding than farming, just because you can control all of the RNG about it. So here we are in the forge, and as you can see, there are a ton of different sets here. There are two kind of special sets. We have the Swift Parry and the Deflection set. They are the only two sets that can be forged with core hammers. And I will tell you right now, outside of forging the Deflection set for some of the missions for, I believe, Vermontu, don't bother with the Deflection set. It's not that great. Given it is a 4-piece set and it's a 25% chance to deflect 1 debuff onto the attacker, it's not worth missing out on whatever other 2-piece or 4-piece sets you might be using otherwise, even with the extra HP and extra defense. If this was, for example, instead an extra 12% speed and something else, that might be more interesting. But because it is not speed, it is HP and defense, which are two of the things that you generally don't really need from these sets, it's just not that great. And this 25% chance, I think Sniper will get it up to a 30% chance. It's not reliable enough to be of any real use. And the situations where even that low RNG might be usable, you're not afforded the ability to use this as a 4-piece set because you need another 4-piece set, aka the arena. And Swift Parry, well, Swift Parry is not horrible. The ability to get unkillable when you get a fatal hit is kind of nice occasionally in arena. It can be a surprise move. You do get a bunch of extra speed out of this as well as some crit damage as well. You can put this on a nuker and keep them alive. In fact, Candrafon in Swift Parry was a meta champion for a long time because he got super tanky, and if you did manage to kill him, well, you may not have actually killed him, which made him very, very dangerous. Plus, because he ramped up his damage when he was under Veils, the fact that he didn't have the ignore defense wasn't as big of a deal with Swift Parry. That said, it certainly faded under Stone Skin, where Stone Skin has become a more reliable way to keep your nukers alive until they take a turn, because Stone Skin is 50% chance to possibly be removed, and otherwise you have to find champions that can deal damage from under Stone Skin. So yeah, Swift Parry, not particularly great. Don't forge a lot of this stuff. It's just not really worth it. Now, Resilience and Perception is where we start getting to the sets that you can actually forge that have the normal stuff. You can see here we can actually forge 3- and 4-star gear. I don't have any on this account at the moment. You can forge 5-star gear, and of course you can forge 6-star gear. Now, why would I ever want to forge 4- and 5-star and 3- and 4-star gear? Well, 3- and 4-star gear is what you would get when you are farming stage like 9 or less from Faction Wars normal. So you're going to build up a little bit of this stuff. And it's actually not a horrible thing to keep around in general, because you can use it for a little extra silver if you're really short on silver, or you can use it for quests that say Forge Perception or Forge Resilience pieces. Well, if you're low on the big stuff, you can forge the little stuff and not use a lot of your resources. Nice and easy. You'll find I have some of the little stuff here on this account because you get this from farming normal Doom Tower. So you're going to still get some of this stuff if you're doing hard Faction Wars only anyway, but you're not going to get a lot of it. So it's, something you can farm to get a little bit of extra silver if you need to. You don't have to worry about it. And if you're short on Magisteel, maybe you actually don't want to use it, although it only uses one piece of magic steel per forge, so it's not that big of a problem. But early on, 3 and 4-star gear may sound like it's absolutely amazing. It's not going to help you that much because you're moving past 3-star gear extremely early, probably well before you're getting to unlocking the forge in the first place. And 4-star gear is okay, but honestly, you're looking to move past 4-star gear as soon as possible as well. 5 and 6-star gear, well, that uses a little less of the magisteel, and that uses the rare and the epic materials, but does not require the legendaries. 4 and 5-star gear for things like perception and for resilience is something you may find yourself farming when you're struggling to get past stage 12 in Faction Wars normal, because you're not going to get the legendary materials until you get to stage 13 in Faction Wars. So making sure you understand where you're farming will let you know whether or not you should be forging the 4 and 5-star gear or the 5 and 6-star gear. I generally would recommend saving as much as you can to be able to forge this 6-star gear and 5-6-star gear here, but early on, there's actually not necessarily a huge amount of harm in forging a bunch of this 4 and 5-star gear, because you might find some decent 5-star gear perception. And honestly, on a struggling early account, 4-star perception is not a bad set to throw on some of your random miscellaneous champions that you're just throwing gear on to get through Faction Wars normal. And finally, we have all the different other sets that we have here. As you can see, I've been farming some Affinity Breaker. We've got Untouchable, that's the Scarab set, not particularly great. Fatal is the one from the Magma Dragon, extra attack, a little extra crit rate, not absolutely trash, but probably not great. Bunch of different sets here. Get down to Lethal being the final one. Lethal is probably the most important set you can farm out of Doom Tower, because it is Savage gear with an extra 10% crit rate, making gearing your champions that much easier. That is effectively like having 2 extra hits on crit rate when you are building a champion, which allows you to get those 2 extra hits instead on some other stat, such as speed, or your attack damage stat, or accuracy, or crit damage. So this is how you build better damaging champions, is eventually farming and building Lethal. And then of course we get to the paid sets here, which for the most part the paid sets are decent. Instinct's not bad, quite as good as Lethal, but honestly it's probably on par with Savage, because that extra speed can be super helpful for a lot of people. Bolster, one of the better sets in the game, extra healing and a big shield early on. Defiant is okay as a bit of an off-piece set, but not great. I've started just selling all of it, and I don't think I'll ever buy a Defiant. Forge Pass again on this account, but for an early game account where I don't have a lot of gear, any of the Forge Passes will get you a ton of 5 and 6-star gear for free, and Defiant is not a horrible set, because defense doesn't suck, and the damage reduction versus AoE is not horrible. It's just not something I find myself being willing and able to use compared to other things that I might want on a piece of on a champion. Righteous, not too bad, gives you resistance and speed, can be very good for some speed resistance champions. It's not great, but it's not bad. And again, for newer players, it's going to be great. For later game players, it's less exciting. And then finally, Slayer is a great set, but it's very, very niche. It's really good on champions with a lot of AoEs. Specifically, Marius in Slayer is absolutely busted. So if you can get your Marius in Slayer, go for it. I think it's a great build for him. It's not necessarily a great arena build, so you may end up with an arena build Marius, and of course your Slayer build for other stuff as well. Slayer is really, really good in Hydra, really good for wave clear, and not quite as good in the arena, just because it doesn't give you any defense. But it gives you all kinds of cool abilities to shred people in, regular sets, can double the damage as well. So in most content, Slayer can be absolutely amazing. But how do you forge the best gear? Well, that is where the charms here come in. So we have the best charms here of rank, rarity, and special charms. So rank and rarity charms give you an increase. In fact, I think we can see the chances here. So rarity charm. So without rarity charm, the odds of getting a rare are 67%, almost 68%. An epic is 25%, and a legendary is 7.5%. So putting a rarity charm doubles the chance of getting an epic and a legendary, to the point of where you're more likely to get an epic or legendary than you are a rare piece of gear. That's a huge, huge swing. Mythic charm actually is going to give you, without the rarity, is going to give you some of these chances here. Basically, it's giving you an extra 2.5% out of the rare for mythical, and then the rarity charm is going to double your ability to get mythic, legendary, and epic as well. That is very, very good rates for getting a mythical piece of gear. So generally, you're going to want to use a mythical charm with a rarity charm because you're never going to not want to do that. And meanwhile, the rank charm, as you can see here, we have the default chance of getting a 5-star and a 6-star, and basically it is doubling your chance to get a 6-star with the rank charm. So rank charms and rarity charms are really some of the best things you can use when crafting gear. And if you have a ton of them, like you see here, I've got over 4,000 here and 4,000 rarity charms. I cannot forge enough gear because I just don't have the magisteel to not be using these on everything I forge at this point in time. So for me, I should be using these things daily. I built up a ton of them, being able to buy them in 3v3, but they just kind of accumulate overall. So once you accumulate a ton of them, then that's fine. However, if you don't have a ton of them, or if you're just forging the 3 and 4-star gear to be able to just throw it away, don't use your charms. Don't worry about your charms, particularly the mythical ones. Those are kind of hard to get, although I'm actually impressed I've got that many mythical charms now. I should never be not using a mythical charm at this point in time, it looks like. Next up, we have the type charms. Type charms are great because they basically are going to double the chance of getting a particular type. So generally, you have a 1 in 6 chance of getting any one of these things. So effectively, what you have instead is a 2 in 7 chance of getting one particular piece of gear. It's not quite the math. I don't know exactly how the math works because I don't think they actually tell you. Do they tell you? Let's take a look at that. Okay, in fact, I may have lied on the, that's the stats. That's different. So these are useful if you're looking for a particular piece of gear. What I generally find is what you're going to be looking for is you are probably going to be looking for chest plates, gloves, and boots most of the time. And what I find is when I'm forging a large volume of gear, I will either not use any of these charms at all, or I will be using the chest plate charms, particularly if I'm forging something that I'm, struggling to get a lot of, like my lethal gear, for example. So if I'm forging perception gear where I just get so much perception gear because I do so much faction wars, I'm not really worried about it. I'm probably not using one of these charms, but otherwise, I think the chest plate charms are probably the best one to use overall. And my logic on that is for helmet, shield, and weapon, those are so easy to get because there's not a random main stat that I don't need to force getting helmets, shields, and weapons because I will get naturally more usable ones of those because I'm never throwing them out just because of the main stat. So I don't find those to be particularly valuable. I would never buy them if they were in the shop anywhere, and I would generally not use them outside of quests that specifically tell me I need to use them because, of course, those exist for, I believe, for Marius or Ramantu, one of the two of them. Gauntlets I might use, but it's going to be dependent on what type of gear I'm rolling. For gauntlets, if I don't care what the gauntlet is, other than I want it to be a gauntlet and ideally with some good stats, then I'll just use the gauntlet. If I'm looking for like lethal gear, where the only 2 gauntlets I really want are crit damage or crit rate, then because I only want 2 different main stats on the gauntlet, I often won't bother with the gauntlet because I'm going to be throwing a ton of gauntlets away otherwise. That said, if I'm actually desperate for gauntlets, that's one of the best ways to actually try to get the gauntlets you're looking for. So why do I settle on chests? Well, for the most part, in almost any set, chest pieces are both one of the ones that can make or break a build, but also are the most variety. So if I'm going to be building lethal, I want attack, I want HP, and I want defense, and I want percentage in those 2. But those are the 3 I'm looking for. Accuracy, I might end up using. Flat stats, probably not on a lethal chest, and resistance, probably not on a lethal chest. On the other hand, if I'm building a perception champion, well, suddenly that accuracy chest, definitely going to keep. Resistance chest, yeah, I'll take a resistance chest in perception. That sounds like a good idea. Bolster. Yeah, I'll take any of those in bolster because if it's a nice attack chest, it might be usable somewhere else anyway, or maybe I'm even going to build an attack champion in bolster. Would be weird, but it wouldn't be the first time I've seen something like that. I mean, Brogni would actually be a good champion to possibly do that on. So, there are reasons to possibly use that. But the defense, the HP, resistance, and the accuracy, all good. So there are more good main stats from a chest piece. So if I'm looking for the most usable pieces, the chest piece is a great one to grab. And finally, for boots, well, honestly, most of the time I'm not using non-speed boots anymore. But if I'm really desperate for boots, I'll probably use a boots charm, and I'll see if I can get some boots, and I might be able to find a usable attack percentage or HP percentage or defense percentage boots. But in general, because it is so skewed heavily towards speed boots, I find that using the boots charms not quite as good as using the chest charms. That's my logic for it, at least, and I don't know if it's 100% accurate. Let me know down below if you guys have different thoughts on which charms are better to use and which ones are not better to use. But definitely the chest pieces, I think, are some of the most important because they can give you the most variety of usable pieces in any set. And finally, we get to the substat charm. And basically the substat charm gives you a 50% chance of guaranteeing that substat on a piece of gear if it is possible to roll it on that piece of gear. Now, I don't know if Polarium has actually said that if you roll a main stat and would prevent this particular thing from happening, if you don't use the charm, it would be nice, but I expect it not to be the case. But basically, these are HP percent, attack percent, defense percent, speed, crit rate, crit damage, resistance, and accuracy. And it's a great way to make sure that you get the stats you want on pieces of gear. So which ones do I use heavily? Well, speed, because, speed kills, and crit rate. Why do I use those two the most? Well, again, I forge a lot of lethal gear. I have a lot of high value of lethal. And right now I'm looking for fast lethal gear because speed is so important in the arena that it is difficult to build really fast nukers. So getting a lot of extra speed on my lethal is a huge game changer for this account. So speed is often what I'm looking for. On my free-to-play account, I'm instead doing crit rate a little more often on lethal because I'm still struggling to be able to build a champion with a crit damage glove that still has good enough stats to be fast enough, accurate enough, and other stuff like that. And once I get enough crit rate substats on some of my lethal gear, that will become much easier to do. So in the lethal case, crit rate is definitely a big deal. But for, perception gear, speed, going to be absolutely amazing for you. Accuracy is actually not a bad option for your perception gear as well. Resistance, probably not the best thing for perception gear, but wouldn't be too bad. But like bolster set, that would make some sense for resistance. Guardian set, that might make some sense for resistance as well. There's a reason to use resistance charms. There's a reason to use speed charms. There's a reason to use crit rate charms. There's a reason to use accuracy charms. Crit damage, another good one. Crit damage is another way to build up damage. So maybe if I've got to the point where I have so much really good high crit rate gear on my lethal gear, maybe I could actually build pieces where I don't have crit rate and crit damage is fine. And to be fair, I keep some pieces that don't have crit rate and have crit damage in lethal in case I can use them on some champions. But getting crit damage on a piece is also another great way to add to the damage. I just generally find that if it has speed or crit rate, I'm more likely to be using it in general, and crit damage is a bonus stat, whereas crit rate and speed are often required stats, so that's oftentimes why I am using those two, or using accuracy, or again, using resistance. But hey, you know what makes some sense? Bolster with HP percent charms. So HP percent charms, not the most useless thing in the world. Attack charms, probably a lot less useful. Defense charms, probably a lot less useful as well. But HP charms, at least there's some uses for bolster necessarily with those. But for the most part, I'm probably not using those unless it's a mission require me to use some of those charms. Are you looking to join me and have fun playing Raid Shadow Legends? Well, I've got the link for you. Use my link down below and get yourself a free LNRL once you get through the tutorial. LNRL is a great legendary, does a bunch of poisons, does irresistible burns, explodes those poisons, going to be very, very great for progressing in the early game, great for your clan boss team, will really, really help you out. And then at level 15, get yourself an Ugo. Ugo is absolutely amazing. She is one of the best endgame epics. She brings your block debuffs, she brings your decreased defense, she's got a heal and a cleanse, she's got leech on that A1, she is super tanky, she's got a chance to revive. Absolutely amazing epic for you. All you need to do is start a brand new account using a brand new fresh email and use my link down below. Get started in Raid and have some fun. So there you go, my guide to using charms in the Forge, where to forge. Again, early game accounts, forging the 3 and 4 star gear is a great way to get some silver. Forging the 4 and 5 star is probably going to be okay very early on. I would not forge it for your, any gear set that you are paying for. So if you are early on and you are buying the Forge Pass for $20 and working the Forge Pass up, do not craft the 4 and 5 star gear. Craft the 5 and 6 star gear, because the 5 and 6 star gear is where you ultimately want to use your resources. And, using the charms, you can direct your gear to be more likely to roll what you want, what type of piece you want, what rarity you want, whether or not it's mythical. You can control your gear, and not only that, but you're always guaranteed to get the set you forge. So forging can be so great for your account. Don't sleep on the Forge, and hopefully this guide has helped you find great ways to use the Forge and better ways to use your charms to make the most out of the Forge. So hey, let me know what you thought of this down below. Let me know, do you use the Forge? Is this kind of new and interesting to you? Is there anything that you think I may have missed as far as tips on the Forge? I love hearing tips from you guys as well. I don't always agree with them, but you know what tips work for you and don't necessarily work for me. That's why this is a game. You can play it your way. Lots of fun, and I enjoy talking about it. So hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. I love making videos like this where I explain things and try to help people out. You guys are an amazing, amazing community. Much love to you all. And until the next video, I am Bront, CatHerder.